Hello, welcome back. So, I'm here to talk to you about something that I wasn't even planning on doing. So, right now, it's 2026. Everybody has done or is doing their 26 books for 2026. And to be honest, I wasn't planning on doing that list this year. But then I thought, this is my year. Like, my entire bookshelf is alphabetized, and there's 26 letters in the alphabet. It just all seemed to make sense to me. And I was like, yes, let's do it. This is my year. And then I was like, I really don't want to do that because I'm not going to look at the list ever again. Not that it really matters, but in my mind at the time when I was making my reading plans, it felt like it mattered. Then I thought about it and I was like, what if I did something different with my 2026 list? What if I didn't just give you the 26 books that I was anticipating reading or the 26 books that best matched all my reading plans? What if I gave you the 26 books that I think are most likely to sabotage all the reading plans that I've made for the year? Sounds good to me, because I figure it's like a very low bar to meet. If they sabotage my reading plans, then I've actually successfully finished the list. And if they don't, I can feel good about that because maybe it means that I've actually stuck to my reading plans. So it's a win-win no matter what happens. Or maybe it's just that something else sabotaged me instead. I don't know, it doesn't matter. I'm going to talk about what it is. I'm going to go A through Z. I'm going to do my best to stick to 26 because as I started creating this list, I was like, oh, there's a whole bunch of things that could just jump on here. So this is going to be 26 more or less A through whatever I feel like. So let's go ahead and get started with the letter A. So for the letter A, I felt like this was a pretty easy pick because every time I look at my shelf that has all the books whose title starts with the letter A, I think about reading this book. And then I convinced myself to read something else for whatever reason. But that book is Audition by Pip Adams. This is a work of science fiction, and it is about two aliens, I guess, that are hurtling through space. What are they called? No, it's three of them, and they're giants. Wow, I haven't read the back of this in a bit. And basically, the way it works is if they talk, the spaceship keeps moving and they get closer and closer to their destination. But if they stop talking, they start growing and they're running out of space on the spaceship. So the stakes are pretty high because they could unintentionally end up killing themselves. It's supposed to be very metaphorical and sounds right up my alley. And it's not something I'm necessarily planning to read in 2026, but that won't necessarily stop me. The other book that's also on that shelf is this one, Annihilation by Jeff VanderMeer. This is not necessarily my reading style, but I love this cover. And every time I see the binding of the book, I think about the cover and I'm like, ooh, I should read that for no good reason, just because I like the cover. For the letter B, I also have two books. Maybe I need to start keeping track on the screen, and we'll see how many books I end up actually mentioning. So if you were expecting your typical 26 and 2026 list or most anticipated or new releases, this is not that video. This is like me just getting hyped about books that I already own, which happens on a fairly regular basis. All right, the letter B. I'm thinking it's going to be the Book of Strange New Things, another work of science fiction because science fiction tends to jump into my life and take over right now. And this is a work that, the premise of it just really intrigues me yet again. It has to do with a married couple who are separated. The husband's gone on this mission trip to another planet to share his beliefs, and they seem very open and welcoming to that. Are they? I'm wondering. Meanwhile, the wife is back home and things aren't really going that well on Earth, and so they're sending letters back and forth. So sci-fi, religious overtones, apocalyptic epistolary? Whose plans is this not ruining? I also am thinking maybe Bambi on a completely, totally different note because Bambi, doesn't that just seem like something you want to read? I don't know. I also have a lot of deer that go through my backyard, and so every time that happens, I think of Bambi. For the letter C, we're not moving through the alphabet very quickly. I have three books this time. Children of Time, I'm thinking, is going to be the most likely pick. Again, it's another sci-fi. I think what I'm ultimately saying is sci-fi is going to ruin all my reading plans, but it might make it a great reading year. But I don't know. We'll find out together. I've had a lot of people recommend this book and say it's really good and tell me that they think I'll like it. I am on the fence because it's also a series, and I'm trying to work through series I'm in the middle of, not start new ones. So this wouldn't be the best choice for me this year. It's also a very chunky book, so it would take up a length of time, but I like long books. I like sci-fi. I've heard very strange things about this book. Or I could end up just getting caught up in The Colony or The Circumference of the World. And I don't feel like I've talked about this book in a while, but this one is sort of more of a cult type of situation, maybe, going on. This one, I don't even remember what it's about anymore. South Pacific Islands, Love for Mathematics, a book that isn't supposed to be exist. Oh yeah, there's like a novel or something going on. It's like a book about books and maybe mathematics. Oh, that's where the circumference of the world comes in. So I realized I'm not done with C yet because there's also Carmilla. Because for my book club this year, we're reading Dracula in October. And I feel like I can't read Dracula without reading Carmilla, so I'm probably definitely just going to randomly throw that in no matter what happens. And then there's also Cautery, because I've been reading a lot of books about women or not reading. No, that's not true. I've realized I own a lot of books that have to do with people in one time period and other people in another time period and their lives being kind of similar. In fact, let me pull all those books. Okay, here they are. So I basically live a if you give a mouse a cookie kind of life with my reading. So The Weight of Ink is one of the books that's on my 2022 self-destruct list. And this has to do with two people who are living in one time period, and I think they're studying another group of people that live in an earlier time period, particularly one woman. This book, Cautery, is very similar. Two women, two different time periods, may or may not be connected. And Possession has to do with more people studying, I think, a poet or something like that in another time period. So I feel like if I read this book, it's going to make me want to read these books, especially if I like this book. So there's three more books on the list. Oops. Okay, we finally made it to the letter D. That would be for Docile. This is a book I recently talked about in a book haul, and yeah, it has to do with basically losing control over yourself or what you're willing to go through to maintain self-control. And this is another book that I have a different book that is related to similar idea, but I'll talk about that one when we get to the letter N. So just remind me when we get there not to skip over that. But there's also two other books that might come into play off the shelf, and that would be Death and the Penguin, because Death, Penguin, Mafia, and I mean, do you need to know more? Like, there's a penguin companion in this, and a mafia, but that has nothing to do with the protagonist, he hopes. And then this one, The Dark Princess by W.E.B. Du Bois. Did you know that he wrote novels? I didn't until last year, the year before that, something like that. But this one has a princess in it who a guy meets in Germany. I think she might be from Paris, though, and she has purple hair. Pretty much, I'm gonna sell out to all the premises in my books. All right, next up for the letter E, I have Embers. This is a book that's not on my radar to read for anything. However, it's a book I've been wanting to read for a very long time, and I finally just bit the bullet and bought it last year, and I'm excited to read it. And then as soon as I bought it, I had a couple of people mention, like, oh, that's a really good book, you should read it. So now that I finally have it, it may end up trumping anything else that I might pick off that shelf. Now, what else in the letter E should I be reading, or do I have plans to read? Probably East of Eden by John Steinbeck. That book, though, while it would help me continue reading some more of John Steinbeck, which I'm kind of interested in doing, and I do really enjoy his writing style, is a book that I've tried before and definitely has a premise that I'm not quite as interested in. And it's a longer book, so if I get to the letter E and I'm feeling like something shorter, this will probably be it. So I have one book for the letter F, and that is Flowers for Algernon. Now, the reason this might come in and interrupt things is I'm in the middle of a high school required reading challenge, and this shouldn't be a book that I'm picking up because it is one that I've read in high school, and I feel like if we're going to continue that challenge, I should save it for that. However, if things go well, we will finish up like the current chapter of that we're doing earlier this year, and I might ruin some of my other plans later this year by picking this one up and like continuing on. It's so tempting. I really want to reread this book. Back to the not planning on continuing any series and having that high school required reading challenge. For G, the book to most likely throw me off is oddly enough Gilgamesh. So I have two copies, so it seems, but I really don't. This is the original Epic of Gilgamesh in a new translation, and this one is a fantasy series retelling, but it's book two, which gets me back to the like, I have no business starting any series. This would be kind of sort of a high school required reread, but the one that we're doing this year is the Odyssey. So throwing this in there is like not what I'm supposed to be doing this year according to my reading plans, but that's why I make plans instead of goals because I can always change them. Okay, moving on to the letter H. I have a couple of backlist books off of that shelf that I should really be going through, but I may instead just decide to pick up How to Live Safely in a Science Fictional Universe because title, like, why not? Like, this is one that would really like just the title piques my curiosity and it would be nice to satisfy that. Now, if you're worried that I'm like planning to read books that I have no interest in, that's not true. Every book on my shelf, I'm really interested in reading. And the ones that I plan to read this year are also ones that I'm really interested in reading. But I know myself, like when it comes time to choose what book I'm going to read, I'll sometimes look at the ones I plan and get distracted by something else. And that's totally fine. In other words, this is all for fun. Don't take it too seriously. Okay, so moving on to I have Inanna, which is the first book in the Gilgamesh retelling series, which is called the Sumerian Trilogy. So really, I'm at risk of starting an entire trilogy this year, and I have found that once I start a series, I don't like to read books necessarily back to back to back. But I do like to finish the series relatively quickly. So if I start this book, I'm for sure moving on to Gilgamesh, which is the book in this series that I really want to read. Also, Britta is probably going to make me do this if she ends up liking it because she's reading that book right now as I'm filming this. I also have I, Robot that might distract me because I've really been enjoying the science fiction I've been reading about robots and AI and sentient non-human beings, if you will. And this is the one that started them all. So the temptation to, go back to the beginning, if you will, it's probably or the letter K because J is pretty safe space. I'm probably not going to touch it. I'm probably going to just do, what I have planned from that shelf. But K would throw me off with Kristen Lavransdatter because I've heard good things about this book. I think it's going to be one that might be a little bit difficult to get into, but she's chunky, guys. And this is just such a nice addition. It just feels so good in the hand. It's floppy for a big book, and I've owned it for a little while and have wanted to read it for even longer, and it just might sneak in March for March of the Mammoths. Though there's probably other things that I want to read more, but time will tell. For the letter L, are we even in alphabetical order anymore? I'm losing track because I'm just getting too excited and distracted by the books, but it might be Lud in the Mist. Why? Because, I mean, guys, this cover, it's just this cover is everything. Like, I almost don't even care what's in this book, though I bought the book and wanted to read the book long before this cover came out. But seriously, like, sometimes you just want to hold a pretty book in your hands, and this is definitely it. For the letter M, I may end up starting another series, which would be Maroons, which is the Black Dawn series. I've wanted to read this series now for 2, 3 years, and this just might be the year to start it, even though I'm trying to focus on finishing series more than starting them. If I start a series, in addition with the Sumerian one, this is one of the ones that I'm most likely to pick up. But if I don't end up picking that up and like restrain myself so that I can start that series next year and really enjoy it, I might instead get distracted by my therapist says this grief journal is a good idea, not just because that's an amazing and intriguing and makes you want to read the book title, but also because this is my Catcher in the Rye redemption story, I'm hoping. So I read Catcher in the Rye last year and enjoyed it more than I did in high school. I'll say that. But this book has a very similar premise where a person has gone through some trauma. They are telling you the story and they're writing in a journal, as the title implies. And it's very similar aged young man with somewhat similar like grief and backstory. And so I feel like this would be the book that would either redeem Catcher in the Rye to me or just show me that I really just don't like that premise and setup in general. And that's what really the problem is with that book. I doubt it. But I'm hoping I enjoy this book anyway. Oh, as I was putting back Blood in the Mist, I realized I shouldn't forget the other series that might distract me, which is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. I read my first Becky Chambers last year, which was To Be Taught If Fortunate, and it made me even more excited to pick up this book, despite the fact that it's a series, because I have found that there are some series that I like. Is that true? I don't know. And if you're wondering, when I reshelve them, I am putting them back in a place that makes them more visible and easier for me to see. Some would call that self sabotage. I call it self sabotage. That's definitely what I'm doing here. Okay, we've gotten to N. I mentioned back with Docile that there was another book that also had to deal with like losing control over self that I wanted to read, and that is Notes from a Coma. So this might unintentionally end up becoming part of like a comparative lit project. But while I was pulling that book, I was like, oh, or I could read this book, The Never Ending Story, because again, beautiful cover. Also loved the movie, also really want to read the book. Or I could read National Telepathy, which has a really low rating for a book, but it's short and it has a crazy premise that has to do with a sloth that has a fascinating yet terrifying secret, which is the ability to create erotically explosive telepathic connections between people, which now also reminds me of a book by Octavia E. Butler. Hmm, that's interesting. Or I could get distracted by The Necessary Beggar, which every time I look at the name of this book, I forget what it's about. And then I read the back of the book and remember that it's like kind of sort of sci fi seeming, where this family gets punished because one of their children has done something wrong. And they're all punished by going into exile. And the exile sounds pretty wild. So does this book. And I realize I'm not always mentioning what else I could be reading on that shelf, but just looking at it on that shelf, have a series that I should be finishing, or at least deciding if I want to finish it. I have a book club book that is on that shelf and a couple of other things that would like help complete projects instead of start them. We'll see if I do that. For the letter O, I'm going with the book Ours. And the main reason is every time I look at my shelf, I see this binding, and it's always the book that stands out to me the most. AKA, marketing sometimes works. In fact, it often works. Okay, I'm gonna skip the letter P because I already talked about the letter P, and now we're just like in a free for all at this point. Let's just be honest. Like I have Q and R. You decide which order the letters go in because I can't even do the alphabet anymore. My brain is like so like books. Anyway, okay, Q R, yeah, okay, this is the right order. Q is literally the title of the book, and I've owned this for a while. It has a really interesting premise. Again, it's a huge, chunky book that would be perfect in March of the Mammoths. We'll see if I end up reading this, but this is definitely one of the mammoths that I'm most tempted to read because it sounds like it's action-packed, adventurous, chasing around, philosophical, and a lot of other weird things that I will probably enjoy. In the meantime, there's the letter R, which is The Road for Roswell. This is like not at all on my radar to read this year, except it would fit into my author project of like reading more books by authors whose works I've enjoyed. So maybe this wouldn't be that like sabotagey. That's good to know. I will say the one advantage of creating this ridiculously long list that I'm sure has passed 26 quite a while ago is that it's really easy to create because I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good too. That wouldn't be bad to read. Like, for example, Stoner. Again, a book that I have no plans to read this year, per se, but you never know when the opportunity might come up. And I know there are people out there who are like, don't buy books until you plan on reading them, and da 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 da. But there's also people out there who are like, booktube can kind of be pretentious and like trying to kind of control your life and tell you what to do. So I'm not here to do that for you. Don't do that for me. Let's enjoy ourselves. And this is what I enjoy. I have always enjoyed having a large number of books. I have always owned a lot of books, and that has started way before I became a booktuber. So booktube has not encouraged me in that. It's just continued me on that journey. Anyway, Stoner might totally distract me. We'll see how that goes. And I've heard about this book for a while, and as I've gotten more into philosophical fiction and just other things and had my channel longer, I've had more and more people recommend that book to me. Sometimes that works out. Sometimes it doesn't, I'll be honest. We'll see. I could also read Sophie's World or Settler's Landing for the letter S because those both sound really good. This would work well in the March of the Mammoths. You know, the only trouble with a mammoth is you can't read them all because they're long, but they're good. Moving on to T, there is no anti-memetics division. This is the book most likely to make me ignore all other books. It has to do with memory loss and viruses and not remembering who you are and losing your entire sense of self, which also might be really fun to read with Notes in a Coma and Docile, even though it's kind of on a different level. Reading plans. Okay, I gotta speed this up because I got other stuff to do. So I also might end up with Tell Me an Ending where someone has, or multiple people, thousands of people, have had a memory removed. Every time I think about that, it sounds crazy and I want to read it. Or on a completely different level, I might read this Japanese classic, which is about like feudal time period in Japan and the warriors there and fighting. And I think it's supposed to be like the War and Peace of Japan or something like that. But either way, I've had it for a while. It's a really nice edition. And it's a little scary because the pages are paper thin. So I feel like they've done a lot of work to get it just to the 900 some odd pages it is. But again, I love a good chunky book. March of the Mammoths, is this going to happen this year? I don't know. I don't have to decide on that for like a good another month. Okay, and I'm going to just round off this whole long list of insanity. I warned you at the beginning it was not the list that, you might have been expecting, but here's the last of the books that I am self-hyping. If you get hyped along with me, I'm sorry. I influenced myself, so I don't need to watch BookTube to be influenced. Okay, for the letter W, X, Y, and Z, and I think U and V because I skipped those as well. I have Wild Seed by Octavia E. Butler. I have really enjoyed everything I've read by her, and this is the last series of hers that I have to go through, and so the temptation to start this as a series when I'm trying to finish series, I mean, I could start it and finish that series. That's got to count for something. Also, there are a lot of classic books that I'm really interested in reading. One of them would be The Water Margin. This is a classic work of Chinese literature, and I believe it is a project that I plan on working on this year. I don't even remember anymore. But again, if you give a mouse a cookie, if I start this book, I'm going to be tempted to start the fantasy series retelling of it, which is The Water Outlaws. I can't help myself. But if I don't do that and I stick to shorter books, I might read something like The Wall, which again, like doesn't fit into any of my reading plans or whatever, or We Computers, which I really wanted to get to last year and didn't. So that's it. Let me stop while I'm ahead. Actually, I'm super behind, but I actually don't care. So there's my 26 plus books that I'm going to read in 2026 because they're probably going to sabotage my reading plans, and I'm almost setting myself up to fail my reading plans, but succeed at this list. So yeah, you go me. I won. Let me know. Did you create a 26 and 2026 list? And how do you think that's going to go? And I'll talk to you next time.